Hi everyone, welcome back. So in our previous video, we discussed certain essential elements of a contract which are not expressly mentioned in section 10 but are still considered very important to form a valid contract. Now, in this part, let us clearly understand the requirements to form a valid contract as expressly stated or specifically mentioned in section 10 of the Indian Contract Act 1872 one by one with some simple examples. First and the foremost, there must be an agreement. As we already know, an agreement is formed when one party makes an offer and the other party accepts it, plus there is consideration for each other. So, for example, let's say A offers to sell his laptop to B for rupees 20,000 and B agrees to buy it for 20,000. Here, there is a clear offer and a clear acceptance and also a lawful consideration. A is getting rupees 20,000 and B is getting the laptop. Hence, there is a lawful consideration also involved. Hence, an agreement exists. So, only those agreements which satisfy the conditions of section 10 becomes contract. Next, essential element is free consent. Now, what is consent? Consent means meeting of minds. That is, both parties must agree upon the same thing in the same sense and at the same time, which is known as consensus ad idem. Consent is said to be free when it is not caused by coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation, and mistake. For example, suppose A keeps B at the gunpoint and says, "If you don't sell me your land, I will kill you." Now B agrees to sell his land out of fear. Here, was the consent free? No, because it was caused by coercion. Out of fear, B agreed to sell his land. Maybe otherwise he wouldn't have never sold his land. So therefore, such an agreement is not considered as valid as per section 10. Therefore, consent must always be free and not forced or manipulated. We will understand the meaning of coercion, undue influence, fraud, misrepresentation and mistake and also its implications in our further videos. Now let's proceed further with the next essential element which is required to make a valid contract. So the next requirement is that the parties must be competent to enter the contract. Now what does that mean? As per the Indian Contract Act, a person is competent, that is legally capable to enter into a contract if he has attained the age of majority and he is of sound mind and he is not disqualified by any law. Now, in our country, the age of majority is considered as 18. Therefore, a person must have attained 18 years of age in order to enter into a contract, plus he should be of sound mind and he should not be expressly disqualified to enter into contracts by any law. Let me explain this with an example. A contract with a minor is not valid. For say, you entered into a contract with a 17-year-old to buy a bike. Such a contract is called as void ab initio, which means void from the beginning. Similarly, if a person is of unsound mind at the time of entering into the contract is not valid. Hence, The capacity of the parties is a must for enforceability. The next important element is lawful consideration. Now, what does consideration mean? Consideration means something in return. It need not always be money. It can also be money's worth. So therefore, consideration is the price paid for the promise. This brings us to the concept of quid pro quo, which means something in return. In a valid contract, each party must give something and receive something in return. For example, when A agrees to sell his car to B for 5 lakh of rupees, here the car is the consideration for B and the money of 5 lakh of rupees is the consideration for A. This is a classic case of quid pro quo. Now, consideration must also be lawful. It should be noted that consideration cannot be illegal, immoral, or also against public policy. Now, what does that mean? If A promises to pay B money for committing a crime, the consideration is unlawful. Hence, the agreement is void. Next is with regard to lawful object. The object refers to the purpose of the agreement. Even if consideration is present, the object of the contract must be lawful. An object is considered as unlawful if it is forbidden by law, defeats the provision of any law, fraudulent, immoral, and also against public policy. Let me give you an example. A and B enter into an agreement to smuggle goods. Even if money is exchanged, the object itself is illegal. Therefore, the agreement is void. So remember, both consideration and object must be lawful. And lastly, the agreement should not be expressly declared void under any act. What does that mean? Some agreements are specifically declared void, such as agreements in restraint of marriage, agreement in restraint of trade, agreement in restraint of legal proceedings, wagering agreements, etc. So, agreements which are illegal are prohibited by law, and a void agreement is the one without any legal effects. So, threat to commit murder or making or publishing any defamatory statements or entering into contract which are opposed to public policy are illegal in nature. Even though all other elements may be present, if the agreement falls under any category expressly declared void, it cannot become a valid contract. So, to summarize, according to Section 10 of the Indian Contract Act, a contract is valid if it has an agreement, free consent, competent parties, lawful consideration, lawful object, and it is not expressly declared as void. Only when all these conditions, along with those conditions which are not specifically mentioned in Section 10 but still considered as essential, are satisfied, an agreement becomes a valid and enforceable contract. In my next video, let us understand about the different types of contracts. See you. Thank you.